Hi, everyone, and welcome back. It is now time to introduce our third session, which is going to be focused on SaaS solutions, as I mentioned just before the break. In this session, we welcome back Galia Ismakova to moderate this conversation between our distinguished panelists. For those of you joining us for the first time today, Galia Ismakova has been with the ADB since 1999, serving in various roles of increasing responsibility, including serving as a unit head for procurement operations in the Pacific region, covering 14 Pacific DMCs, and in the Southeast Asia region, covering 10 Southeast DMCs. Galia has been a key leader in driving the e-procurement agenda, leading various ADP initiatives that have laid the foundation for nations to launch their respective digital transformations. Joining her in this session will be Hunt Lakasha, who is a senior procurement specialist in the governance global practice at the World Bank. Based in Washington, D.C., Hunt focuses on the full range of procurement, fiduciary, and reform, service, and knowledge functions supporting the World Bank's global portfolio of projects, which contain information and communications technology components. He plays a substantive role in improving World Bank ICT procurement practices and approaches. Hunt also leads initiatives to modernize the procurement function in the World Bank client countries by providing e-procurement advice, performing assessments of country e-procurement systems, and measuring the cost savings in public resources. Also joining us in this session, we have Mokoulu Adesina, who is a senior e-procurement expert supporting the Nigerian Governors Forum. Since 2008, he has been working with international development partners on public procurement reform interventions at the federal level. He has led many innovative IT projects and digital procurement initiatives at the federal level in the public procurement sector in Nigeria. Notably among them is Nigeria's Open Contract Portal, which won the Government Innovation Award in Open Contracting in 2017. At one point, he was the project manager that commenced the implementation of the federal e-government procurement project before he was engaged in his current role as the senior e-procurement specialist by the Nigerian Governors Forum, where he is providing technical support to the 36 states on the implementation of e-procurement SaaS solutions through a multi-user framework agreement. And last but not least, we have Paul Featherstone, who is the Director of International Sales for Intend. Paul leads the Intend approaches into new and existing markets, focusing on the provision of a class-leading e-procurement platform to its expanding global community of users, working with national government users and large non-government organizations with operations on multiple continents. He is part of the senior leadership team that plots the vision for the Intend e-procurement solution to meet the evolving requirements of its public and private sector user base. Prior to joining Intend, he spent over 20 years in the private sector working in logistics, business process innovation, and lean supply chain operations for the automotive sector in the UK, working with notable clients such as Aston Martin and Jaguar. As with all of our sessions, if you have any questions or comments for the presenters, please use the Q&A feature in the Zoom application to submit questions. You'll see that button right at the bottom of the Zoom application. And please do share your questions there and or ideas and comments. And we will do our best to address as many of those questions as possible throughout our session. So without further ado, I will hand it off to Galia to begin the session.
Thank you very much, Roger. First of all, I need to introduce the topic of software as a service and why we decided to actually cover it in such depth today. So software as a service is a software distribution model in which a third-party provider hosts applications and makes them available to customers over the internet. SaaS is one of the three main categories of cloud computing, alongside infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So a cloud service has three distinct characteristics that differentiate it from traditional web hosting. So it is sold on demand, it is elastic, a user can have as much or as little as of a service as they want at any given time. And the service is fully managed by the providers. The consumer needs nothing but a computer or tablet, phone, and internet access. So there are multiple considerations in how to procure SaaS for e-procurement. And I did cover them in our 5th conference last year. Some of these considerations are: who owns the data? Who owns the system? Will the government retain right to the system infrastructure so that they may continue operation on its own? Will the government retain access to the data, etc.? So when preparing for this conference, I reached out to Hunt and talked to him about emerging issues and what we can discuss. And he came up with this idea of presenting fantastic development in Nigeria, where a country of 200 million people have actually introduced e-government procurement system with the help of World Bank, but actually procuring it in a framework contract as SaaS. So Hunt will tell us a bit about how did World Bank and the government of Nigeria came to this idea. And Isaac will actually give us a perspective from the client point of view, because he mostly serves the clients. I mentioned a bit about Intent Solutions that is available to ADB customers. And Paul Featherston is actually going to talk a bit about what Intent can do for you. So without further ado, I will turn it to Hunt.
Well, thank you so much, Galia. You know, it's a real pleasure to be here virtually. I recall last year we were in Manila and it was such a successful event. In previous years, I recall in Georgia and also in Washington, D.C. So what a opportunity we have this year to do this virtual event. Thank you for organizing this. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get, so I will share and go to,
Okay. Yep.
Yep. Let's see here.
Slideshow.
Yep, I'm clicking on, there we go. Okay, excellent. I tried to get that to automatically come up, but it, for some reason, went back to the way it was. So today we're going to discuss our e-procurement deployment at the state level in Nigeria. And what we'll do is we'll discuss about the Nigerian context. We'll discuss what the bank funding tool is, I should say, and then the approach that the team took. So Nigeria is in West Africa. It has a population of 200 million, more than 200 million. It's 1/5 of the population of Africa is actually in Nigeria. It has the largest city, Lagos. The political structure is a federal system. So it's very similar to America in that the 36 states in Nigeria have fiscal autonomy. And most states do have public procurement. And most of the states do have public procurement agencies, although electronic government procurement did not exist. So the World Bank has a number of funding mechanisms. Probably the most familiar to most of us are, the input-based, what we call IPF projects. But in this case, the bank came up with a different funding mechanism, which is called Program for Results, or we call it P4R, which for short. And this is an output-based funding mechanism where the bank funds programs and then disperses on whether or not those programs meet certain agreed upon indicators. And these indicators we call disbursement linked indicators, or DLIs. And this is believe it or not, it's a $750 million P4R. And procurement is just one of the components, right? There are several other components in the public sector, right? And so the name of the project is the State Physical Transparency, Accountability, and Sustainability, and we call it SAFTIS for short, which is the pronunciation of the acronym. So the idea for the PDO for this, the program development objective, is to strengthen the physical transparency, accountability, and sustainability in Nigerian states. So this is not a federal project. It is focused on the states and building capacity within the states. And it's over a 4-year period, from 2018 to 2021. And the aims are to significantly improve the outcomes in 4 areas. So increase physical transparency and accountability, strengthen domestic revenue mobilization, increase efficiency in public expenditure, and strengthen debt and stability. So now, moving on. So again, we discussed how this particular funding instrument works. We have what we call disbursement linked indicators, which are agreed results to achieve for disbursement. And then we also have verification protocols, and the verification protocols are quite involved. One thing you do is you set up the various indicators that you want to include, and then you incorporate how are you going to verify that those indicators have been met, right? Then you need to put together, identify expenditures linked to achieve those results, and then there's a program audit. And then we have a program action plan, which is derived from the following assessments, which is a technical assessment, integrated fiduciary system assessment, environmental and social systems assessment, and an integrated risk assessment. And there are some other optional assessments that you can do. So it was quite a challenge putting together what we would call the DLIs for the project. There needed to be a strong consistency across the states that there are 2 priority actions. Also, we had it in years 3 and 4, the states are required to align with international best practices for IPSIS and NCOA. And also there are very different entry points to accommodating different starting points. And you can see here for other disbursement link indicators what the targets were, okay? So to achieve disbursement linked indicators and results, the performance-based guarantee is in proportion with the number of DLIs achieved, right? So we have different DLIs, and you can see here how they put together the disbursement linked indicators in the various results areas. Now, if we take a look, let's take a look at result area 3. This is increased efficiency in public expenditure. And if you take a look at DLI 6, we can see improved procurement practices for increased transparency and value for money, okay? And this is where our team really focused on this. And as you can see, there's many other DLIs, but in this presentation, we'll talk about DLI 6. So DLI 6 is to improve the procurement practice within the states and to increase transparency and value for money. And as you can see, we have disbursement linked indicators for each of the years. And we divided them into two. So we have one is we have a DLI 6.1, which is associated with the Public Procurement Legal Framework and Procurement Regulatory Agency. So to be able to qualify for DLI 6.1, you need to ensure that the Public Procurement Legal Framework incorporates e-procurement into the law, and it should conform with the UNCI trial model law and provide for the e-procurement. And secondly, there also needs to be a public regulatory agency that has been established, and it should cover all the MDAs receiving funding from the state budget. So this is quite important. Now, a lot of states actually already met that, a certain percentage. So, but a number of them didn't. So there was support to update these procurement laws and set up these public procurement regulatory agencies. Then second, DLI 6.2 is really focused on EGP, okay? And what we did here is we incorporate over a number of years a phased approach for the introduction of e-procurement. The first is just to make sure that the contract awards are above a certain threshold set out in an operations manual within each of the states, are published on a monthly basis in OCDS format on the state website. So really that's, you know, this is, as we know that usually the first step in getting e-procurement implemented is publishing and e-publishing and notifications. And here we have the publication in OCDS format of the contract awards above a certain threshold as one of the indicators. And additionally, it's for 2018 and 2019. Then in 2020, the indicator is, and we'll get through this, is to sign the framework agreement, which we'll get to, and also a published contract award information above the certain threshold in OCDS format on the website. Now, there's also a stretch target for some of those states that are more advanced, where if they can implement e-procurement in 3 MDAs, education, health, and public works, and publish all the contracts award information in OCDS format, then they will indeed qualify for the DLI for year 2020. And then 2021 is at this stage, they would have e-procurement in at least 4 MDAs, and they would also be publishing OCDS contract information in the other MDAs. So, and this is the money associated with this. So for DLI 1, which is the public procurement law to incorporate UNCI trial and e-procurement and setting up of the procurement regulatory authority, there's a one-time payment of $2 million. And the idea is that once they get this $2 million, they can use that for establishing the e-procurement, because again, this isn't input-based, it's output-based, right? They only get the money once they actually meet the indicator. Now for DLI 2, if they met 2018, which was publishing in award information in ODS format, OCDS format, they'd get $500,000. Same with 2019. And then for 2020 and 2021, you can see based on the basic target or the stretch target, they'd either get 1 million or 1.5 million. And then for 2021, they'd get 2 million. So here are some of the information associated with the DLR, which is the disbursement link requirements and the verification protocol associated with it, which is quite involved. The MDAs, and we also have to, for this verification, we have to put together a very strict verification framework and ensure that each of the MDAs each of the states can meet that. And we have an independent verification authority that actually goes and does the verification. So that is something that's very interesting. And then here we have more information about the verification protocol. That the idea is not that the states actually, install and get up and running e-procurement. Nope, they need to be using e-procurement. So it's transactions. The states need to have transactions in the e-procurement system, and that's the verification. And they need to have it in 3 for 2020 MDAs, which MDAs are contracting authorities, or 4 in 2021. And we have included that they are the education, health, and public works. And then additionally, publishing all the contract award information in OCDS format. What would be the data sources for this verification? The State Bureau for Public Procurement Authority or equivalent. Official state websites can be used for the Office of the Auditor General for the states, the state government, and other relevant ministries. Also the Open Contracting Portal and the Office of the State Accountant General. These are other means to verify this information. And here we have the Independent Verification Authority, and they will carry out this verification procedures to obtain a schedule of all the contracts awarded during the year for all the various years for the MDAs or the contracting authorities with or without e-procurement for the publishing of the OCDS data. Okay. And we have even some more detailed information on the verification process. And I would encourage those that are interested in an approach, an output-based approach like this, and an idea of how to verify this this is some very rich information here. And there's more information here on the verification for the year 2021. For example, the Independent Verification Authority would need to obtain a report on all the transaction of the 4 MDAs that have implemented e-procurement for the year directly from the e-procurement system. Also obtaining a separate report of procurement for all 4 MDAs for the year from the Accountant General. So the due diligence is done in the verification process. And again, it's not just the installation of an e-procurement system, but it's the use on a transactional basis. So that is the introduction of the program that the World Bank used. Now what we'll do is we'll go into, how did we meet this? And I'm going to have to go and open my other project here, which is other presentation, and I'm going to present it. Okay, so now we'll discuss, that was the first presentation on the program and the funding tool and the mechanism and how it worked. In this particular case, we're going to talk about here we had this this challenge to get EGP implemented in 36 states, and how were we going to do that, and what tools did we have? So one of the things we needed to do is we needed to meet with the clients, right? So the World Bank put together a workshop about 2 years ago, and we met with the 36 states. So there were the director generals from each of the public procurement agencies in each of the states. And then we also had the IT directors, either from the IT agency or from the public procurement agency. And we met, and we went through a number of ideas of how this could be actually implemented. And the things that we talked about we talked about common approaches to establishing an e-procurement system, options for the state's implementation, the e-procurement modules which we would define as what is e-procurement in this regard. As we all know, there's many modules associated with e-procurement, and we wanted to make sure that we were ensuring that we were having what you would consider a management information system, a procurement management information system that had transactions associated with, but understanding the capacity of many of the states, we couldn't go for a full all the modules. So we had to identify which modules we were going to use. We had to come up with which solution type of solution, whether we're going to do a custom solution, whether we're going to do a COTS solution, commercially off the shelf, or a software as a service. And we needed to discuss with the director generals and the IT directors, these various solutions. And then we had an issue with, how are we going to procure this? Are we, even if we come up with a really sleek solution, we still would have to do 36 potential procurement transactions. And then also talk a little bit about the sustainable business model. And then obviously one of the issues that our colleagues in the states had with security, and then we'll talk about the various hosting solutions. So, we discussed the various approaches to establishing an e-procurement, owned and operated by a third-party service provider, or a government owned and operated. So there are, these are typical solutions that you find throughout the world for implementing e-procurement. Okay, and for the states, there were a couple different options, right? First, we could have each of the states implement their own e-procurement solution, which it was interesting. In the workshop, the very first workshop we had, the states themselves realized that really wasn't a feasible solution, and they amongst themselves agreed that they would implement whatever that solution was. And whatever that solution was, that it would be just one solution that they did. Additionally, at the same time, the federal government had funding for implementing an e-procurement solution. But the issue is that there were two different funding mechanisms. With the federal government, the funding mechanism was an input-based, and what we call an IPF at the World Bank, which tends to be a bit slower. And they also had different ideas of the functionality at the federal level. They wanted a much more functionally, many more modules at that level. And also to meet the disbursement linked indicators for the state project, we needed to really get rolling. And we couldn't really wait around for the federal system to get built and then piggyback onto that. So, and to meet the DLIs, the states had to really get moving. So there was a discussion on putting together a framework agreement for a software as a service e-procurement for all the state solution. We'll talk about how we got to there. So one thing we needed to do was we needed to define what was e-procurement for the states. And what were we going to define? So what we did is we kind of there's 10 various modules in any procurement system, or more if you want to consider complaint mechanisms and things like that. But what we decided is it would be a registration module. And this is not just registration for vendors, but this is registration for MDAs, the public procurement authorities themselves, obviously consultants and suppliers. We also, the procurement planning process is very important in the Nigerian states. So we also included the e-procurement planning. Furthermore, e-publishing and e-notification, e-tendering, and e-award and e-evaluation. So these were the 5 modules which we defined, which would incorporate for the Nigerian states to meet the disbursement linked indicators. These would be the 5 modules. So one of the exercises we need to do is we needed to come up with, so workshop number 2, after we decided that there would be one system, is we needed to come up with the business requirements and functional, the business process and functional requirements. So there was quite a bit of effort to put those functional requirements and business processes together. So we did have another workshop where we worked together with all of the states. And we even, I think, brought in a consulting firm to help put together those requirements. And additionally, we wanted to make sure that there was, a change management program associated with this, because we all know that you can put a system in there, but if we don't put the right changes into the system to make sure that the users of the system know how this works and know the different processes associated, then it's not going to be terribly successful. And also, we wanted to make sure that the system fully supported open contracting data standard. Okay, so in the end, we had gone through the various software options, whether we would build a custom solution, which can take quite a bit of time, a commercially off-the-shelf solution, or a software as a service. And after the various workshops we had, it was pretty evident to the states that to meet the DLIs in such a quick time frame, that we would need to go with a software as a service. And so software as a service is licensed on a subscription basis, usually monthly or annually. It's centrally hosted either with an e-procurement firm or hosted on one of the international public clouds, such as an Amazon or Microsoft Azure. It's accessible via web browser over an internet connection, and this web browser could be on your laptop, on your phone, on your tablet. And for our case, we wanted to make sure that the states own the data, right? So in our contractual agreement, we made sure that the states own the agreement. So what's the benefits of SaaS compared to some of the other implementation types, such as custom and commercial off the shelf? Well, one, it's easy upgrades, right? Because everybody's on the same system, and it's the responsibility of the implementer to upgrade the system anytime there's either an operating system upgrade, a hosting upgrade, an application upgrade. It's really their responsibility to do that. There's also a lower upfront cost, right? Instead of having to do a big implementation, really you pay your subscription fee, you make some configuration changes, and you're up and running. There's a quick setup and deployment. It's very accessible from the web browser, and it's scalable too. That's a good thing, is that it can work. You only pay for what you use, so you can sign up for 100 users or 1,000 users or 10,000 users. So, but you do pay for what you use, but it is very scalable. So in this particular case, it worked well. because we could, the states realized that they could get up and running quickly, and that they would need to, really, instead of focusing on the development of a system, they would focus on their business processes and their change management within their public procurement agency and within the MDAs, or the contracting authorities. So that was an important milestone for the project. I will just talk a little bit about framework agreements. Isaac will go in depth on the framework agreement that we put together. But the framework agreement is an arrangement for the anticipated supply of goods or services over a period of time. It's an agreement between one or more contracting agencies and economic operators to establish the terms of governing contracts to be awarded during a given period with regard to price and quantities envisioned. And one of the reasons we wanted to do a framework agreement is we didn't want to have 36 different procurement transactions. We wanted to have one, and then be able to do contractual framework contracts based off one agreement. So we did have a lead state, and Isaac will talk about that. But the benefits of a framework agreement is there's lower contract prices and improved quality and reliability, reduced cost of the process, reduced time for acquisitions. There's stronger supply chain management, efficient emergency operations, use of scarce resources, governance, and enhanced governance and budget planning. Now, we have 3 tiers of this framework agreement. The first is the e-publishing and notification. The second are the registration, publication, e-tendering, and e-evaluation, and there also is e-planning in there. So the first 2 tiers, each of the countries would meet the DLIs, and then those states that wanted to do more could do more. They could actually implement a full e-procurement system, which would include contract management and a BI reporting and dashboard. Now, one of the things that we did consistently mention from the very first workshop that we had is that, e-procurement is different than a lot of other government systems, in that you have many stakeholders, and you can build a sustainable business model around an e-procurement system, right? So instead of depending on a central government funding, maybe such as a HR system or a IFMIS system, or a tax system, in e-procurement, you can charge for certain functionality. Now it needs to be balanced with making sure that there's enough competition. So you could get revenue from contracting authorities. You could either charge them to post tenders, or you could charge maybe a certain percentage of each of the awards. You can get revenue from economic operators, maybe charging them to register or to submit a bid. And then there's other opportunities. There's advertising on the site, maybe specific data analytics features that folks might be interested in. So we wanted to make sure that the states understood that, after the funding is gone, that, you can incorporate sustainable business model to fund the subscription-based SaaS system moving forward. Also, we wanted to focus that security is essential. SaaS is hosted in the cloud, so we wanted to make sure that the states felt comfortable with the hosting. So the host is confidential, commercially sensitive information, right? Sensitive information should be stored in encrypted formats, which was part of the requirements. You have a role-based security model, meaning that vendors will have a different functionality than MDAs, as would the public procurement agencies. Everything would be secure and encrypted communication protocols such as HTTPS. And we have safeguarded against all known security threats, and we would have anti virus protection system. So anytime any of the documents, whether they're bids or tendering documents, were uploaded into the system, that there would be an antivirus protection. And again, we have this idea is the SaaS system would be hosted in a cloud, and you can see that in the cloud you have various mechanisms for accessing the cloud. And the benefits of the cloud is, one, you have control. It's efficient and it's cost reduction. If you can imagine, if we had to create a local hosting solution for each of the 36 states, it would have been extremely expensive. Not only just getting the hardware in there, but we'd have to secure the power and secure a really stable internet connection. So in this, by using the cloud, we were able to alleviate that. Also, the cloud provides disaster recovery, data security, and mobility. And I would say scalability is another one, right? You can easily scale a cloud solution. So, and then also with the cloud, you can access the various applications, in this particular case, the e-procurement system, from various devices, whether it's a tablet, a server, a laptop, or a phone. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm going to hand it over to our colleague, Isaac. And I would just like to thank Isaac. He's been in the middle of all this. And he's done a fantastic job. And it's been a real pleasure working with Isaac on this project. So thank you so much. And I look forward, after Isaac's presentation, and our colleague's presentation from the ADB to the questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let me stop sharing. All right, so I'll just go straight away. Sharing my screen right now. All right, so Hunt has said so much about how we started, and I have the privilege of working with the Nigerian Governors Forum. Nigerian Governors Forum is a forum that houses all the 36 state governors, in the country, and it touched a little bit on the structure and the governance system in Nigeria. So you are looking at putting together 36 autonomous states, agreeing to do something together, especially something very critical like management of their resources and the public expenditure. So he has given us the background as to where we started with regards to the framework agreement and how all the states came about that. And he also touched on the definition, so I'm not going to go around that. But very, very importantly is the implementation of even how we got there. In addition to what he said, is the fact that there's need for inclusiveness and ownership, participation and ownership of the process of the framework agreement itself. More so that at the end of the day, we're going to have just one lead purchaser, and the other states are going to follow, with that framework agreement by just signing the framework contract. So in order to make sure that there is ownership of the entire process, the World Bank even worked with all the states to ensure that right from the advertisement stage, all the states are involved. And up to the point that all the states have to put up the adverts on their individual websites, just as part of the ownership. And very critical is to also ensure that they are part of the critical decision-making process, especially the evaluation, stage of the framework contracting process, because the framework contracting process actually was through an international competitive bidding. And at that evaluation stage, what happened was the bank also, the state also looked at the states that are bit matured, in IT, and we were able to select like 3 states, and to even have 3 states that are mature. So those 3 states are the states that participate, in the bid evaluation process to select the vendor that will actually roll out the SaaS solution. And how did they even come about the lead purchaser? They had to look at that point at also one of the leading states that actually ventured to start the e-procurement itself. So what that tells you is that is a state that is ready to go, is a state that has high-level political will that is ready to kick off the digitization of the procurement system. So it helped, the state to look at, okay, this state is actually at the forefront. The governor, has the political will to make this happen. So and speed is also very important, just like Hans has said. So this was pretty easier for all the state to arrive at just one lead purchaser. So at the end of the day, 3 states participated at the evaluation stage. And beyond that, there was also a monitoring team that monitored the entire procurement process. So what was done was that to ensure that they now pick one state from each of the 6 geopolitical zones or that comprise the country to represent each geopolitical zones in the country to also be part of the monitoring team that monitor the entire procurement process. So at the end of the day, is to ensure that by the time a vendor emerges, we will have a vendor that will be accepted, by all the states. Not that everybody will now want to say they don't know about the emergence of the vendor. So at the end of the day, the procurement process threw up a vendor, and a framework agreement was signed with the lead purchaser, and that framework agreement has generally has the background, the core details of the framework contract itself, the technical requirements, the basic services that will be offered, which we will see as we go on. Then the pricing mechanism, the basic prices for all the modules that will be rolled out, and the principle for payments, how the payment will be done and the delivery. So, and the framework contract is that medium that each states that will be participating in the framework agreement will now have to sign individually to commit themselves, because it's a framework contract that is actually legally binding. And one of the things that framework contract actually, the advantage that it gave the states, and one of the things that it helped us to move ahead, is that the framework contract also allows the states to be able to customize the SaaS to the peculiarity of the states, because we found out that there are peculiarities across the 36 states, which the state will want to put forward beyond what we had in the framework agreement. So they didn't want a situation, it gave them an opportunity that framework agreement didn't just come to dump a system on them, but also they also have an opportunity of the framework agreement to talk one-on-one with the vendor to negotiate. We actually had negotiation with each of the states, which was a very thorough, process. I'll quickly run through the framework agreement, the component, because some of the components, let me say that beyond them being legal items or legal articles, it also touches on critical points that has to do with change management, that has to do with the fear, that has to do with myths about adopting e-procurement. Because in my role as the one that is coordinating all the states, a lot of questions came up. Why do we want to go to the cloud? Why can't we have the system? Why can't I have my system in my state? So I found some of these elements in the framework agreement, this article, very useful to convince them that, see, your data will be safe because we have articles, in the framework agreement that protects you. We have, which we'll look at later. So these elements of the framework agreements are very, very useful in our advocacy in getting them to get on board and really getting to sign on, to this framework contract. So we have the introduction and the main agreement itself. Then we have the general provisions about commencement, modification, termination, because some of them were coming up with the question, okay, when we start this framework agreement, should we want to pull out sometime in future? Are we free to pull out? what will happen to our data when we want to pull out and so on and so forth. Probably when they get mature, they now feel they can stand on their own and so on and so forth. So these terms give them comfort. You understand that there are ways to exit, the framework agreement if they feel they want to exit to another system, or they want to even move to probably a better service provider that can offer them a better SaaS deal. And very, very much important is also the fact that they will be able to test, and there are issues around guarantee and liabilities, also disputes, settlement are some of the issues that we also talked on. And very, very importantly is the governance model. How do we ensure that the SaaS, solution is managed? How do we ensure that the relationship is managed very well between the vendor and the state, and the state in the implementation of the SaaS solution? Because we have the public procurement regulatory authority and we have the main users themselves. So across these three, actors, how do we ensure smooth relationship and smooth management of the solution? And we also have the specific provisions. So these specific provisions are very useful, and this is where we have a tough time during negotiations, and a lot of states, depending on their peculiarity, depending on their maturity level in IT, came up with a number of things that they want modified, they want added, and we have that specific provision for them to add all of that without creating stumbling block. And very, very important also is the service level, which is key, which is king in SaaS solution. They want to be able to ensure that the service that is being rendered, there is value for money at the end of the day. So how do we monitor, the service that is being rendered and so on and so forth? How do we handle change management issue? Very, very also important is the fact that they also have the right to audit the service provider. That gives them a lot of comfort in terms of ensuring that if they say their data is secure, is their data truly secured, and so on and so forth. What's the vendor has a tier 4, data center, is it truly tier 4? And so a lot of issues, concerns, that normally comes from public users of the public cloud. So these are some of the things that we're able to resolve with this provision that gives them a lot of comfort. Then we have a framework schedule that talks about schedule of requirements, the schedule of service, the pricing schedule, and the SLA itself, the going deep into the nitty-gritty of the service level agreement. Looking at the price, we have the supply and installation cost, and we have the recurrent element of it. Well, for the supply and installation cost, because it's a competitive process, it was pretty much reasonable, and they look at the cost elements that has to that goes into this. And very, very important in this supply installation cost is the configuration and customization. Just like I said, the states are different level of maturity. Some have legacy systems that have to be integrated. So so this cost has to be, there was this discussion at the negotiation table between the service provider and the state to ensure that they are able to take on board all their legacy systems. They're just not going to throw everything away. Their tax system, integration with tax system, integration with payroll, integration with HR system, and so on and so forth. The things that will enable, that will help, and the revenue system also. Talking about the payments of for bid and so on and so forth. Then training was also very key thing that the states are particular about, because they know that the capacity is low, so they were so concerned about how to ensure early adoption of this e-procurement system. And that led us to the critical component, which is the change management. So change management is very key in this process, and every state that we spoke to talked about the change management, because they know that this is very key to ensuring success. And what the World Bank has done also as part of the package for this project is to also ensure that another firm, technical assistant firm is procured to offer this support, so that the state will be supported along the implementation journey, so that it does not really matter if they don't have real capacity, you understand, to implement an IT project, but the technical assistance firm will be able to offer them that technical assistance. And coming to recurrent, this is where they talk so much about, and attention, the recurrence, one of the things is the module. There are four basic modules: planning, registration, publishing, tendering, evaluation, and award. Then if states wants to go further, they can actually go further. Like the lead purchaser actually went all the hog and embraced all the modules, and they are currently implementing that. And they also touched on, they are very particular about the technical support. In all of this, they are looking at the way to drive down the cost as they, continue to get themselves engaged, in the framework contract. So these are the key issues that we have seen so far. It's important to ensure compliance with local legislation. And when we talk about compliance, there are some states over the time before the project started and now, they have improved in their IT, IT space. They have IT policies that do not allow their system to be hosted outside of the state. So this led to a different level of discussion during negotiation. There are issues of data residency, and there are also, even at the commercial level, some states have different taxes, and this had to, impact on, okay, was this taken on board, during the procurement process and all of that. So I'm saying this so that people that wants to go into this this kind of arrangement will also ensure that the local legislation are also, researched and looked into. Very key among the things that we talked about during the advocacy level, during the negotiation level, is the data ownership. They are so keen about the data ownership. And like I said, there are provisions in the framework agreement and the framework contract that clearly states that the state owns the data and they control the data, and they can have access to the data before the termination of the contract, and even after the termination of the framework contract, the data can be transferred, to them before the service provider can either destroy the data at the end of the day or do away with the data. Then access and the use of data. They also want to be sure that the service provider will use the data for the intent and for the purpose of the framework contract. They don't want to be betrayed and stuff like that. So there are provisions that ensure that the service provider ensures that he only uses the data for the purpose of rendering, procurement service to the state. There are issues of breach of data breach, so that the state also ensure that there are provisions that make sure that they are protected, and there are penalties, and which could also lead to termination of the contract if the service provider does not sit tight to ensure that it protects its infrastructure from data leakage and stuff. Then data recovery, there are issues of that as well, to also ensure that the service provider has enough and adequate facility to ensure that there are data disaster recovery sites, and that it also saves backup, of the data offsite, in a very secured environment. And very key to them is exit management, because some of the states are maturing. They are looking at some point they want to exit. So what would be the plan? So they are well detailed, mapped out plan, exit management transition service, wherein the service provider will also support the state to migrate whether to another service provider or to their own facility at the end of the day. And also, lastly, very important to ensure value for money is to ensure that there is service assurance, through ensuring that service level is well defined, respected by both parties, is monitored, very, very important. And there are compensations, understand, in case the service provider default. And very, very important to them, which they put to the table, is that there must be monthly reporting on how the service provider is doing in rendering service. So I'd like to stop there, and I'd like to say thank you very much for this opportunity to share our experience in Nigeria.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Isaac. This was very interesting to hear from the point of view of the client. So we're also joined in this session by Adebayo Adeniyi, and he is a senior procurement specialist in the governance global practice of the World Bank. He is based in Abuja, Nigeria, and he has more than 35 years of experience, in which 18 are in development work. He focuses on the full range of procurement, fiduciary and reform, service and knowledge functions, supporting the World Bank's Nigeria and West Africa regional portfolios. in the preparation of complex, high-value projects in energy, transport, water, and governance. He was involved in this particular project as well, and Hunt has actually presented on the base on behalf of Adebayo. We will just let him share some of his thoughts about what were the three biggest challenges in this project for him.
Thank you very much. I think I need to apologize for joining very late. I think I got mixed up with the time, maybe because of the change from summer to winter. I didn't update my calendar. I'm really sorry for that. And let me also thank Hunt for making my presentation. I know he was able to handle it very well. I'm sure he did. Thank you, Hunt, for that. I will just speak briefly on some of the challenges that we face or we are still facing, because it is still an ongoing program. That is the SIFTAS program that we face. And one of the things we experienced when we started, we were actually talking with the head of the procurement agencies of the 36 states. So all the preparatory work, all those things about how to go there, what to adopt, whether we should go for one system or whether we should go for the type of solution, was done with the head of the procurement agencies. Even during the preparation of the selection of the vendor, we are also talking with the head of the procurement agencies of the 36 states. So when it came to the actual signing of the contract, we now discovered that the stakeholders were far more than that, and the people that were actually calling the shots were the political head in Nigeria. It's strange. Hunt was actually surprised when we were talking. They said, okay, we need to get the governor to approve. The governor is the head of the state, the political head of each of the state. Or we have to get the commissioner involved. We have to get the lawyer involved. And so that's one of the reasons that even up to now, very few of the framework contracts have been signed. So we have to, it's like starting all over again, because they were not originally part of it. And I think it's a lesson, that we are learning going forward, that in a civil operation in future, we should not just limit the stakeholders just to the head of the procurement agencies, but we should also involve even the decision makers. Even though, during the process of the framework agreement, the governors were also involved in their state, and the head of procurement agencies was still saying we need to go and get the approval of the governor. And we actually recognize that this could have been, what could have been responsible for this is that even though the governors were there at the meeting, they all agreed to it, but there was no communication down to the head of the procurement agency that this is the route, that this is what we want to do, and that we have actually agreed for the agreement our state should key into this framework agreement. Because one of the reasons, access. Most of them do not have direct access to the governor, and the governor was also not available to talk to them, to communicate that to them. And that has also influenced the implementation and the signing of the framework contract. Another important thing is just that we also understand, even though we have been talking with them, is, I'm sure Hunt must have said it, currently we don't even have any e-procurement solution that is up and running, that is up and running in the country. So this is one that, we are trying to use this program to actually introduce the e-procurement to the 36 states. That is similar one that was being done for the federal government, but that one is not part of the SIFTAS before. And because of the lack of knowledge of e-procurement generally, it was difficult for them to really understand a lot of the things that we are also talking about. So the other one is that they also brought in their ICT specialists. Some of them are actually not even government, they are not even government officials, they are political appointees of the governor. So, and they have already, they believe that there's this belief that e-procurement is all ICT, and we try to explain to them that the ICT is just an instrument for you to do the e-procurement. So those are the ones that are insisting that, oh, we must have this solution in our server. Some of the clauses that were peculiar to SaaS, they really didn't also understand it, becoming understand it, oh, we don't want to go to the cloud. You cannot, why are we using one state or the other? So by and large, I think we are getting over those, and we have been able to speak to as many as possible.
Can I ask you a question, Adebayo? Did COVID-19 actually accelerated the kind of acceptance of e-procurement now?
Yeah, I will say yes, because, but we also want to take, I want you also to know that we have started this program far away, as far back as 2018, even before the COVID-19. Maybe the COVID-19 was also another instrument, to push the state of the need, for them to actually use the e-procurement solution. Maybe that's why we now have, a lot of buying in. Even some states that we didn't even reckon with initially that we will be part of the e-procurement. Those are actually the ones that I'm signing now. So maybe, yes, I agree. The COVID could have contributed, to the acceptance and the way, the government, the states are key into the e-procurement. But I also have to state that we started the program long ago, 2018, before COVID.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Hunt and Isaac and Adebayo. I will now need to turn it over to Paul, who is in a different type of situation. He is actually he represents the industry. He represents
thank you very much.
those who actually provide it.
Thank you, Galia. I'll just try and share my screen so that I can show you the presentation, which appears to be presenting an issue for me. Just bear with me a second. Right. Well, there's a challenge I'm facing there because I can't seem to share the presentation slides. Are there any of the colleagues from the Aon support team that could share my presentation that I've sent to you previously?
Pam, can you please share the
Yeah,
presentation?
I think she's just replied to me privately, Galia. So I think she's just about to bring that up. So hopefully that will be seen. If you can just give me a nudge, Galia, when you can see that. Obviously, I can see my face at the moment. Ah, there we go. Excellent.
Yep, can see it.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so from Intend's perspective, as a lot of you may know, some of you not, we've been supplying the ADB EGP APPPN platform now since 2016. As Galia intimated, this is a fully software as a service platform that is hosted by Intend and provided to as many of its of the ADB clients as see fit and want to use the platform. It's not just limited to, as Gary had mentioned earlier, to ADB projects. They have used it for projects that are funded by the governments themselves, as well as third parties that provide funding for certain project-based or general procurement exercises. We've just kind of just move that. Now, some of you will notice that two things here. One is my backdrop has been dropped because my first laptop had decided to crash just before the session. The second one was that I put the 3rd of October as the presentation date, so apologies for that. Just to run through briefly the e-procurement history that we've got. Obviously, I think as Jeff referred to earlier when he was talking with Joe, or mentioned Joe, in the early 90s when they were talking about bulletin boards, and so the ERP platforms were starting to bring out the e-procurement into the sort of public sector arena, so that you could engage with supply chains and bring about obviously best value for the public expenditure. That's sort of at the sort of start of where the e-procurement platforms came out. Then in the sort of 2000s, you started to see specialist e-procurement providers come into the system. Intend obviously being one of those, with which what were considered now probably quite basic e-tendering platforms that still, to be fair, fit a lot of the requirements for a number of users in terms of the e-tendering functionality. You then started to add in other elements of systems such as the auctions, contract management, evaluations, and separate items that sort of fall into the e-procurement arena, but don't actually sort of form part of that e-tendering process. As we then rolled through the sort of 2000 into the 2010s and into the 2019, sort of 2020 as we are now, we're starting to look at more integrated systems, API integrations. The use of data within platforms now is significantly greater and will provide a consistent number of improvements for organisations that use EGP systems, e-procurement platforms, so that they can purchase better and ultimately, as Gallagher had said earlier as well, remove risk, which is inherent within the procurement arena. If I can, where's that? Next. Can I move on to the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. So as part of the sort of the scenario today, I'm going to try and talk about three sort of themes. The first one being around the I've gone skipped on there. Sorry about that. The first theme regarding the building of the tools. So as I mentioned earlier, what you've got is the start of the e-procurement environment revolved around the e-tendering platform, and so getting suppliers to bid electronically to your opportunities that were out there, looking at how you could increase that supply network, get better value, get a better provision of service. What you've now got is the tools now extend far and wide. WHO, I think, have won the Nobel Prize for e-procurement, or one specific area I think was mentioned earlier, and they're a user of the Intend platform. So I think in terms of how the depth and breadth of how e-procurement tools are used now, it's becoming significantly more complex in terms of the range of tools that are available to the procurement teams within public sector. You've moved along from the e-tendering environment through to a natural evolution of you now have requisitions that are raised and some automation within that process. The requisitions are passed through to the procurement department, who then can build a tender process or a framework or a dynamic purchasing system, which seem to be adopted nowadays. Through to an automated evaluation or a semi-automated evaluation process that then builds into the contract management and the building of KPIs, reporting on delivery of that contract. So you're seeing an end-to-end e-procurement system that is effectively now being built into all of the e-procurement teams or the procurement teams within the public sector. And with varying degrees of complexity depending on whereabouts teams are within that procurement journey. If we could have the next slide, please. The next slide talks about the adoption of system, how you can get the user experience to be improved by the use of an e-procurement platform. As mentioned, I think earlier by Anna, one of the key elements is to get some buy-in. I think also Richard and Jeff mentioned this as well. You've got to get buy-in from the people that are using the platform. It has to be straightforward to use. The use of workflows and systems that are automated or guide users on the procurement side through the platform is critical in getting buy-in within the organization itself. But also what you have to do is make sure that you take your supply network with you on that journey and bring a supplier interface that is both easy to use, but also allows suppliers to express their full range of offerings and services. Maybe marketplace is a way to go through some sort of shopping cart. Maybe you want to make sure that your supplier network are able to submit the full complement of documentation. If there are limitations on document uploads and things like that within your platform, that can create a lot of pressure within your supply network to make sure that they are streamlining their offer to meet your system specification parameters. If you remove those barriers, you give the supplier, admittedly, you do get the opportunity then for them to bombard you with everything that they do rather than the specifics of the tender process. But you can tailor your procurement process to put some guidelines in place and bring about the sort of the best information that you're looking for that specific operation. If we move on to the next slide, please. That talks about some of the internal factors. Again, Gallard identified the removal of risk is a challenge for the public sector. The use of an electronic system where everything is controlled within the platform, from the creation of the process, the communication to your supplier network, the responses from your supplier network, and any of the correspondence, the clarifications within a platform, that should all be auditable, and that should all be user viewable, depending on your rights and permissions on who can view what. So you may have, as was mentioned earlier by, I think it may have been Richard, talked about the ability to have different people within an organization view different things within a particular process. So you may want to limit who has the capability of answering clarifications or viewing clarifications or taking part in an evaluation or a moderation process within a particular opportunity or project. So the removal of risk is a big one, and the sort of second sort of tier that's allied to that is the sort of economic factor of making sure that you get best value for the public money. This is becoming increasingly relevant now, and obviously the sort of crisis that we're all currently going through. A lot of money has been diverted to the things such as PPE, the provision of services that weren't necessarily at the forefront of public sector minds prior to the outbreak of COVID. Funding now is pivotal. Governments obviously having to sort of put in structures to pay for existing organisations that are currently shut down because of COVID. And the way that impacts on the total available expenditure available to governments and their sort of subordinate departments means that you're going to be looking for increasing savings, which inevitably means increasing the supplier network, removing some of the connections between that supplier network, expanding the possibilities of working with different parties who you'd never actually looked at previously. You then move through, could I have the next onto 2 slides, please. I'm on to external factors for my E.ON colleagues. The external factors, as has been mentioned, and I think Galia brought up the question, how COVID had influenced the movement of globally the transition to a more digital environment. We've seen this across the board, certainly from Inten's perspective. A lot of our customers are, because Intend has always been a software as a service, where we're getting an increasing number of inquiries from, anecdotally, is because where people have had legacy systems that are based on servers within a particular location, the requirement for remote connections to that particular server creates challenges for the organization themselves. So they have to limit the amount of exposure they have to the outside world due to security issues and things like that. So VPNs and timings are limited. With something like a software as a service, if it's cloud-based, if you have an internet connection, for example, for Intend, you can effectively run your procurement process. You wouldn't necessarily want to run it on a mobile phone, but you can do should you want to. The platform is now fully available through a mobile app or a tablet or a laptop, and provided your bandwidth, and it doesn't have to be that great, is sufficient to support a web browser. Again, sort of the main sort of driver behind some of this inquiry level that we're currently seeing is regarding COVID and the number of opportunities that we've seen created within our platform has not necessarily increased or decreased. It's relatively static. The reviewing the opportunities that are going through the platform, a lot of them in the sort of March, April, May period were based around the PPE, so that then places extra burden on the procurement teams to move their focus away from what would be their day-to-day business onto these specialized products. Again, the creation of short-term projects for the rapid fulfillment of PPE, for example, have moved on both on budgetary requirements and also timing requirements to make sure that people can react quickly. And an EGP system, software as a service, allows that movement of information from buyer through to supplier network very quickly, with automatic notifications through email to tell a supplier that there are new opportunities, or there was a recent clarification regarding a standard for a face mask or a gown or whatever the area has to be. Again, the time that we're saving doing this means that the facilitation of the provision of the contract is much swifter provided rather than using a paper-based platform. If we could look through to the next slide, please, which is the emerging technology. As we look at the things that we've got in the next sort of 2 to 4 years for the e-procurement environment, we're looking at an increasing amount of data being used, and as there are significant concerns regarding data security and data ownership, as was highlighted earlier by Hunt and our colleagues from Nigeria. There are a number of organisations that create tenders within an EGP platform, but the collection of that data can inform how exercises are conducted in future for everybody. The sharing of information, not necessarily through a platform such as E10, because we'll tend to bring it in and deal it as individuals. The connection of organisations who wish to share their information sources is one of the challenges that we are currently looking at, and how we enable that whilst maintaining that security of data, but allowing the sharing of information between public bodies, using similar platforms to get the best value, to remove some of the costs in the supply chain, because of the volume that you're looking at as a collective is better. Looking at the history of supplier relationships with KPIs that are monitored, and the capability of seeing really, where are the wins? Why do we need to each organisation? We don't need to keep reinventing the procurement process from start for a particular proven technology. The use of, as Hunter outlined earlier, the use of frameworks to procure certain products or services when you have a a lot of work at the start of it. The framework in the UK in particular is rolling around into what they call now a dynamic purchasing system, which means rather than getting onto a framework at the start of it and then the framework running with a number of suppliers that are fixed, the DPS, as it's called, is it allows people to come onto the framework at any point in time, so that you're not necessarily, once you've missed a framework date, you've then missed it until the end of that framework. With a DPS functionality that Intent does fully support, you can now bring suppliers on at any point during that framework. So you can, particularly on the PPE side, it's become increasingly relevant where organizations who arrive at an innovative idea or a new technology or something that is using a different manufacturing technique can be approved and brought back onto the framework for that. Next slide, please. I'll talk about it. It's automated procurement. So as part of the automation of a procurement platform, you have things in there such as reminders regarding the contract management system. If things are automated to make sure that providers or suppliers have a reminder email or a reminder notification within their side of the platform that their compliance requirements need updating, if they've got some certifications that are coming due, you need to be able to remind the provider, 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, 20 days, 10 days before that due date falls in. And the same regarding managing of KPIs, reminding the supplier that they need to submit responses. You then need to do the same so you can manage how that contract is being managed. There are numerous examples and quite a lot of case studies, certainly in the UK on the Crown Commercial website, regarding contract management, and some particularly poor examples where organisations haven't tracked the contract properly and ultimately end up spending significantly more money on the delivery than was originally set out. A few last sort of closing sections, because I know we're sort of drawing towards the end. Unlocking the tail spend. As organisations look at the percentage of requirements that fall outside of the e-procurement system that just get brought into the sort of finance department as an ad hoc spend, but a below threshold spend. The use of an e-procurement platform and the availability of passing procurement exercises down to smaller teams, devolving the exercises to lower level of procurement staff, but capturing that spend in one place, brings about the sort of benefits of unlocking that tail spend and bringing in the capability of recording where the tail spend is going. Sometimes an organisation might have 20 or 30% that falls underneath the threshold. And to bring that into the e-procurement platform, even if it's just to look at the analytics of where the money is going to, what sectors are benefiting greatly from that, and can there be any benefits born from large-scale negotiations rather than individual contracts on an ad hoc basis. And then finally, looking at the sort of use of external data sources. Again, I've mentioned very briefly the use of APIs, working with either a third-party ERP platform to bring in finance connections, so you have live data on both platforms at any one point. Working with third-party markets such as UNGM, which is integrated with Intent is integrated with, so you can pool a greater number of suppliers and make them aware of a greater number of opportunities, again driving that competition and ultimately trying to get best value. And finally, I'd just like to say that obviously from a perspective of procurement in general, there's a lot of talk about AI and big data and bots and employing advanced analytics. I think this is all something that we face generally across all mediums, not just e-procurement. But I think it's one of the sort of critical roles that e-procurement has in shaping as budgets across the globe become tighter as a result of the COVID crisis. Procurement has a role in making sure that things within the public sector are more efficient and better driven. I've tried to cram that into as short a time period as I can. So I do apologise, Galia, for A, not having my slide up on the show, but I think we've got through everything in due course. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Paul. This was very informative. So I think we'll bring back the rest of the panel now. We have very little time left. However, I want to ask you to all members of the panel, what is the biggest obstacle to actually adopting software as a service, in your view?
Can I pick that one up first, Galia? Because we're just going through a process at the moment. Yeah, sorry. I think it is, and it was mentioned earlier. It was about having and changing attitudes internally within organisations to move from the legacy status of having a system that is embedded locally on a local server to moving it to cloud-based. There is not necessarily a trust issue, but a thought process that at some point that data will be lost and it's no longer theirs and there's no physical attachment to it. And I think as was identified by the sort of presentation earlier, as you put that agreement together, there are rules and regulations that you bind as part of the contract that the data is owned by the organization. So just because it's simply stored in the cloud, it doesn't mean that that data is any less valuable or any less accessible to you.
Thank you very much. I have the same question to colleagues from World Bank and from Nigerian government. What, in your view, are the biggest challenges? I see that 36 states were supposed to be using the system and 3 have done it so far. 3 have signed their framework contract so far. So what do you think is stopping them from signing these contracts and starting using the service? Apart from hierarchy of who is signing the contract.
If I can comment on that, if I can comment on that, I think, I mean, we started, I mean, as I stated before, I mean, I think the major constraint is, I mean, the hierarchical structure, I mean, of everything has to go to the highest authority in the state to get the contract signed. We have had discussion with so many of the states, and it's not as if they're not willing to sign, but I'm sure quite a large number of them will say sign. And another constraint could also be some states that think that they can, I mean, have it on their own. Like the Paul said, they believe that they're not very comfortable. There's one particular state that is not very comfortable with having a cloud-based system. And they said that they have a policy in their state that all their data must reside within the server in their state. So that can also be another reason. But I'm sure we definitely are going to have quite a lot of more states that we sign. Isaac has actually been following up on getting the state to sign. I'm sure from maybe you also have some other experience where you think that the signing is a little bit slow.
Yeah, just like you mentioned, you need to understand the attitude to start solution. For example, just like you said, the IT guys feel they are losing control, especially when you have this framework arrangement. So there is this disincentive, from the IT decision makers, you understand, to want to flow with this system. Also, there's also what comes with framework agreements, the issues with framework agreements, and is the issue of loss of control of the process. You understand, because you believe everything is tied to the center. You understand. So I'm just going to latch on what has already been prearranged, by process. So every procuring entity naturally want to have control of its own procurement process. But unfortunately, in this instance, the control is at the center. The procurement is at the center. So that's also is also part of the challenge. Aside from the issue of some of them are just entirely new to e-procurement, just like Mr. Adebayo has said. So it took a lot of confidence building through the provisions of the contract to say, okay, tell me your fears. So once they voice out the fear, we'll direct them to appropriate clause in the contract that says, see, this clause is provided because of this, is provided because of this, is provided. So that provision actually helped to allay their fears, and some of them gradually are actually stepping forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hunt.
Yes. Thank you, Paul, Adebayo, and Isaac. So I would echo very similar concerns from this standpoint. I think one is it's the cloud. States and other clients are concerned about the cloud, but I think they can see the cloud obviously coming, right? I mean, it's something that's happening throughout all, whether it's our phones or applications that we use. It's definitely happening, but we definitely hear that the hosting of the data outside of the state in a cloud is an issue. That's one issue. Number two, and probably the most significant that I think that we're coming up against and will be coming up against moving forward, is the adherence of the requirements to the SaaS system, right? You don't have the customability that you would have with a custom solution or a COTS solution. You really, the organization does have to change its business processes to meet those processes of that SaaS solution. And I think that's another big factor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. These are all important consideration. Very often when you bring the paper-based process and you try to digitize it, one of the ideas that a lot of people have is just to replicate a paper-based process without having efficiencies that e-procurement can actually bring, including analytics, spend analysis, including also procurement planning, automation, all of the things that actually create additional value on top of savings that everyone wants to point out in use of electronic procurement. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. This was a fantastic presentation, and I am very pleased with day number 1. Thank you very much to Hunt, Adebayo, Isaac, and Paul. And over to
All right. Hello, everyone. So we have made it to the end. Let me just do something right here. We have just made it to the end of day 1. We thank you so much for all of your time and being with us, your engagement, your questions, your comments. Everything has been incredibly helpful to making this event a lot better. Thank you so much to all of our speakers and our moderators for the great conversations and the insightful presentations that, from what I've seen in the chat, have absolutely helped people start thinking about the right actions to take and what they could be doing in their own areas, in their own regions or countries. We have a poll that will be happening shortly. We're going to have polls throughout the entire event. So there will be polls that might pop up at any time. Thank you so much for the participation you've already had with that, and continue to do that. It does help us to make this event a lot better, even while we are presenting it. So we will see you tomorrow for our first session, which will be on the applications of artificial intelligence on e-procurement. So that's going to be a very interesting topic, and really cutting edge topic to talk about tomorrow. The first session will start at 1:30 p.m. local Manila time, so keep that in mind. I've shared in the chat before the link to the agenda. I'll share that shortly as soon as I go offline. You'll see it in the chat. It'll pop up in a minute. But do plan to sign on about 10 minutes earlier. This way, when we start exactly at 1:30 p.m. local Manila time, we are ready to rock and roll. We go right into the session. You'll already be there, so you won't miss anything, the beginning or the introductions or anything like that. Finally, you'll be able to rejoin us using the same Zoom links. So what you've received in the registration information, continue to use those. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We look forward to your participation. And again, thank you so much for being so actively engaged today and making day one a very awesome success for all of us. And we look forward to serving you tomorrow again. So enjoy your evening, your night, the rest of your day, wherever in the world you might be. And we will see you tomorrow.
Thank you.